Whispers haunted Kathleen Ross as she knelt before the third headstone, the freshly turned earth still damp beneath the Arizona sun. The townsfolk of Oatman watched from a distance, their murmurs carrying on the desert breeze as they huddled in clusters, just beyond the iron gates of the cemetery. "The curse has claimed another," one woman whispered, making the sign of the cross. "3 husbands dead in 4 years, a man replied. "Ain't natural." Kathleen's black mourning dress absorbed the heat as she placed a single wildflower atop Benjamin Warren's grave. At 28, she had buried 3 husbands, first Thomas at 24, then Edward at 26, and now Benjamin. Each man had died under different circumstances: a mining accident, a fever, and a fall from a horse. Yet the pattern was enough to spark the suspicions of a frontier town desperate for explanation in a harsh land where death was common, but coincidence was feared. She rose slowly, her shoulders straight despite the weight of grief and accusation. The year was 1881, and Oatman was booming with the promise of gold in the nearby hills. The mining town had drawn prospectors, merchants, and desperate men from across the country. It had also drawn Kathleen, a widow even before she'd arrived, hoping for a fresh start in the Arizona territory. As Kathleen walked the dusty path back toward town, the crowd parted like water around stone. No one offered condolences. No one met her eyes. Only Abigail Miller, the preacher's wife, dared approach with a covered dish. "For your supper," Abigail said quietly, her eyes darting to the others. "I'm sorry for your loss, Kathleen." "Thank you," Kathleen replied, her voice steady. She had no tears left. "You're the only one who still speaks to me. People fear what they don't understand." Abigail squeezed her hand quickly before retreating. The boardwalk creaked beneath Kathleen's boots as she made her way to her small house on the edge of town. She had purchased it with money from her first husband's modest estate, determined to make a life for herself rather than returning east to family who had never approved of her marriage. The 2-room structure was simple, but hers alone a rarity for a woman in the West. Inside, she removed her black bonnet and stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. Green eyes stared back, haunted but clear. Her chestnut hair was pinned severely, and her face, once called pretty, had grown lean with grief and determination. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something in her direct gaze that had drawn men to her. 3 dead husbands, she whispered to herself. "And now I am truly alone." The following morning, Kathleen opened her small millinery shop as she did every day except Sundays. Few customers would come, fewer still since Benjamin's death, but routine was her armor against despair. She arranged ribbons and feathers with careful hands, stopping only when the bell above the door jingled. Sheriff Marcus Taylor stood awkwardly in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Warren." "It's Miss Ross now," Kathleen said firmly. "I'm returning to my maiden name." The sheriff nodded uncomfortably. "Miss Ross, then. I've come with difficult news." Kathleen's fingers stilled on a length of blue silk ribbon. "What is it?" "There's talk in town. Bad talk. Some folks are saying," he paused, looking pained. "They're saying maybe your husband's deaths weren't all accidents." A cold weight settled in her stomach. "Are you accusing me of something, Sheriff?" "Not me, Miss Ross. But there's pressure. Mayor Jenkins thinks it might be best if you considered moving on, for your own sake." Anger flared, hot and sudden. "I've committed no crime. I've lost 3 husbands, each death investigated and found to be accidental. I will not be driven from my home by superstition and gossip." The sheriff shifted his weight. "I understand, but do you? Do you understand what it is to be alone in this world, to love and lose and then be blamed for that loss?" Her voice remained level, but her hands trembled. "I built a life here. I will not abandon it because of frightened whispers." The sheriff replaced his hat. "I can't protect you from the whole town if they turn against you, Miss Ross." "I've never asked for protection," she replied. "Just justice." After he left, Kathleen closed the shop early and walked to the edge of town, where the desert stretched vast and unforgiving. The distant mountains shimmered in the heat, and a hawk circled overhead. She had always found peace in this landscape, so different from the green hills of her Pennsylvania childhood. As she turned to head back, she noticed a cloud of dust approaching from the east riders coming into Oatman. New arrivals were common enough, with the gold strikes bringing fortune hunters and those who preyed upon them. She thought nothing more of it until later that evening, when a knock came at her door. Kathleen reached for the small revolver she kept in her apron pocket before opening the door. A tall man stood on her porch, his silhouette dark against the fading light. "Miss Ross." His voice was deep, with the hint of a Texas drawl. "I'm Nathan Irwin. I've purchased the Circle B ranch outside of town. I understand you make the finest hats in the territory." She kept her hand on the revolver. "My shop is closed for the day, Mr. Irwin." He stepped back respectfully. "Of course, I apologize for the intrusion. I'll call tomorrow during business hours." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Mr. Irwin," she called after him, curiosity overcoming caution. "Who told you about my shop?" He glanced back, his face now visible in the light spilling from her doorway. He was perhaps 35, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. "The livery owner. Said his wife wouldn't wear any hat but a Kathleen Ross creation." She studied him, searching for any sign of mockery or malice. "Did he mention anything else about me?" Nathan Irwin's expression shifted subtly. "He mentioned a few things, none that concern me." He nodded once more. "Good evening, Miss Ross." Kathleen watched him walk away, his confident stride carrying him down the darkening street. She closed her door, wondering if he truly didn't know about her reputation, or if he was simply being polite. Either way, she doubted he would return to her shop once the town's gossips had their say. To her surprise, Nathan Irwin appeared at her shop the following morning, just after she opened. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing thick dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. "As promised," he said with a slight smile. "I hope this is a better time." Kathleen nodded, maintaining her professional demeanor. "What can I help you with, Mr. Irwin?" "I'm in need of a new hat. Something practical for ranch work, but presentable enough for town visits." He gestured to the well-worn Stetson in his hands. "This one's seen better days." She moved to her selection of men's hats. "I have several ready-made that might suit, or I could fashion something to your specifications. I'd prefer something custom if you're willing. I've found most hats don't quite fit my head properly." Kathleen reached for her measuring tape. "I'll need to take measurements." He stood still as she worked, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency, noting the dimensions in a small notebook. She was aware of his gaze, curious but not intrusive. "You've been in Oatman long?" he asked. 5 years. "And before that," she met his eyes directly. "Philadelphia originally, then Denver with my first husband. Mining brought you here?" "Yes." "Though none of my husbands found the fortune they sought." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "Few do. That's why I stick to cattle, more predictable than gold." "And what brings you to Oatman, Mr. Irwin? There are better cattle lands elsewhere." "The previous owner of Circle B was my uncle. He died last month and left the place to me. I was ranching up in Montana, but the winters there were getting harder each year. Thought I might try my luck in warmer country." As Kathleen wrote down the final measurements, the shop door opened again. Mrs. Hollister, the banker's wife and one of the town's most prolific gossips, stopped short when she saw Nathan. "Oh, I didn't realize you had a customer, Miss Ross." Her correction was pointed, her gaze moving between Kathleen and Nathan with undisguised interest. "Mr. Irwin is ordering a custom hat," Kathleen said evenly. "I'll be with you momentarily." Nathan put his old hat back on. "How long for the new one? A week, if that suits." "Perfect." He nodded politely to Mrs. Hollister as he left. "Madam." The moment the door closed behind him, Mrs. Hollister leaned forward. "That's the new owner of the Circle B. Handsome, isn't he? And a bachelor from what I hear." Kathleen began arranging hat boxes. "Did you need something specific today, Mrs. Hollister? I should warn you, dear. The whole town is talking about your situation. It would be a shame if that nice Mr. Irwin became your fourth victim." Kathleen's hands stilled. "I have never victimized anyone, Mrs. Hollister, and Mr. Irwin is a customer, nothing more." "Of course, dear. I'm only concerned for your reputation." The older woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps a fresh start somewhere else would be best for everyone. After Mrs. Hollister left without making a purchase, Kathleen sat heavily on her work stool. She had expected the town's reaction, but the reality of it, the isolation, the suspicion, the thinly veiled threats was harder to bear than she had anticipated. The next few days brought few customers to the shop. Those who did enter seemed to be there more out of curiosity than any desire to purchase. Kathleen worked steadily on Nathan Irwin's hat, grateful for the task that kept her hands busy and her mind focused. On Friday afternoon, as she was closing the shop, she noticed a group of men gathered outside the saloon across the street. Their voices carried on the still air, growing louder as their discussion heated. "3 husbands, all dead unusual-like," one man said. "Ain't natural." "Heard she poisoned the second one," another added. "Made it look like fever." "Sheriff says there's no proof," a third voice interjected. "Course there ain't. She's clever. Probably bewitched the sheriff too." Kathleen's cheeks burned with anger and humiliation as she locked the shop door. She kept her head high as she walked past the men who fell silent at her approach. "Gentlemen," she said coldly, not breaking stride. As she continued down the street, she heard footsteps behind her and tensed. A hand touched her elbow lightly. "Miss Ross." She turned to find Nathan Irwin beside her, his expression concerned. "Mr. Irwin, I thought I might escort you home." His eyes flicked toward the group of men who were watching them intently. "That's not necessary." "Perhaps not, but I'd consider it a favor." "I was hoping to ask about the progress on my hat." Kathleen hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence for a moment before she spoke. "Your hat will be ready tomorrow, as promised." "I appreciate that." He matched his pace to hers, unhurried. "I couldn't help overhearing those men." "Is that sort of talk common?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Increasingly so. Apparently, I've moved from unfortunate widow to suspected murderer in the town's estimation." Nathan frowned. "That's a serious accusation, with absolutely no evidence." "My husband's died from a mine collapse, pneumonia, and a riding accident. All witnessed, all investigated by the sheriff." She shook her head. "But people prefer a dramatic story to a simple tragedy." They reached her house, and Kathleen stopped at the gate. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Irwin, but I should warn you association with me may not be good for your standing in town." He smiled slightly. "I've never put much stock in town opinions, Miss Ross. I prefer to form my own, even when they concern a woman with 3 dead husbands. Especially then." His blue eyes held her steadily. "Grief doesn't make a person dangerous, fear and ignorance on the other hand." He gestured toward the town. Despite herself, Kathleen felt a flicker of warmth at his words. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Irwin." "I've been called both." He tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow." That night, Kathleen sat by her window, finishing the final stitches on Nathan's hat by lamplight. It was a practical, well-crafted piece, made of quality felt with a medium-wide brim that would provide good protection from both sun and rain. She had added a simple band of braided leather, nothing fancy, but elegant in its simplicity. As she worked, she found herself thinking of Nathan's kind eyes and direct manner. It had been a long time since anyone in town had treated her with such simple respect. Benjamin had been gone 4 months now, and while she missed his companionship, their marriage had been one of convenience more than passion. He had needed a wife to manage his household, and she had needed the protection of a husband in a town that was becoming increasingly hostile. With a sigh, she set the finished hat aside. Entertaining any thoughts about Nathan Irwin was foolish. Even if he seemed unbothered by her reputation now, it would only be a matter of time before the town's whispers reached him. And no man, however kind, would court a woman believed to bring death to her husbands. The next morning she carried the hat to the shop and placed it in a box lined with tissue paper. Around noon, the bell above the door signaled Nathan's arrival. "Right on time," she said, presenting the box. "I hope it meets your expectations." He removed the hat carefully and examined it, turning it in his hands before placing it on his head. It fit perfectly, the brim framing his face in a way that enhanced his strong features. "Excellent work," he said, admiring his reflection in the small mirror on the wall. "It's the best-fitting hat I've ever owned. I'm glad it pleases you." She named her price, which he paid without hesitation, adding a generous tip. As she wrapped his old hat in paper, he said casually, "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tonight at the hotel restaurant." Kathleen stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Dinner?" "Yes. I've been eating my own cooking for a week now, and I'm desperate for a meal prepared by someone with actual skill." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "And I'd appreciate the company." She shook her head. "Mr. Irwin, I don't think you understand what you're asking." "If we were seen dining together, I understand perfectly well," he interrupted gently. "And I'm asking anyway." "Why?" He considered her for a moment. "Because I enjoy your company, because you make excellent hats, because I don't give a damn what this town thinks." He smiled slightly. "Choose whichever reason you prefer." Kathleen studied him, searching for any sign of ulterior motive. Finding none, she made a decision. "The hotel dining room is very public. There's a private parlor. I've already reserved it." She raised an eyebrow. "Rather presumptuous." "Hopeful," he corrected. 7 o'clock. Against her better judgment, Kathleen nodded. 7 o'clock. After he left, she questioned her decision a dozen times. It wasn't proper for a recent widow to dine alone with a bachelor, especially one she barely knew. The town would certainly talk. And yet, the prospect of an evening away from her empty house, in the company of someone who didn't look at her with fear or suspicion, was too tempting to resist. At 7 precisely, she arrived at the Oatman Hotel. The desk clerk's eyebrows rose when she asked for the private parlor, but he directed her without comment. Nathan was already waiting, standing when she entered. "Miss Ross, thank you for coming." He held her chair, and she noted that he had arranged for them to sit at a proper distance across the table, not side by side as might suggest impropriety. The hotel's cook had prepared a simple but well-made meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. As they ate, their conversation remained safely neutral: the weather, the region's history, books they had both read. Gradually, Kathleen felt herself relaxing. "How did you come to be a milliner?" Nathan asked as they were served coffee. "My mother taught me. She made hats for ladies in Philadelphia." Kathleen smiled at the memory. She believed a good hat could change a woman's fortune. "Stand tall and wear something magnificent on your head," she used to say, "and the world will assume you belong wherever you go." Sound advice. It served me well when I first came west with Thomas. Denver society wasn't sure what to make of an Easterner, but they respected my craftsmanship. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. After he died, I continued the trade. It's given me independence. A rare thing for a woman out here. Yes. And not always welcome. She met his eyes. May I ask you a direct question, Mr. Irwin? Of course. Why did you really invite me to dinner? And please don't say it was for my company. We both know there are plenty of respectable widows and unmarried women in town who would be delighted by your attention. Nathan set down his cup. The truth, I admire courage. It takes courage to remain in a place where you're unwelcome, to face whispers and suspicion with dignity. He leaned forward slightly. I've known men who'd break under the weight you carry. Kathleen was taken aback by his candor. Some would call it stubbornness rather than courage. Perhaps, but I find it admirable either way. He paused. And yes, I enjoy your company. You speak directly without the coyness I've encountered in other ladies. She couldn't help but smile. Coyness requires energy I don't possess these days. Then we understand each other. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute, to direct speech and excellent hats. After dinner, he walked her home through the quiet streets. The evening air was cool and stars spread across the dark sky in a dazzling display impossible to see in eastern cities. At her gate, Kathleen turned to him. Thank you for dinner. It was pleasant. High praise indeed, he said with a smile. Pleasant enough to consider doing it again. She hesitated. Mr. Irwin, Nathan, please. Nathan, I should be honest with you. I have no intention of remarrying. Ever. 3 husbands are quite enough for one lifetime. He nodded thoughtfully. I respect that, but friendship isn't marriage. In a town like this, friendship between a man and a woman is often seen as a prelude to marriage, or something less respectable. Then let them see what they wish. I'm offering friendship, Miss Ross. Nothing more, nothing less. Kathleen studied him in the moonlight. There was something refreshingly straightforward about Nathan Irwin, a quality she had rarely encountered in men. Very well, friendship it is, he smiled. Excellent. Then, as your friend, may I call on you Sunday after church? I thought you might enjoy seeing the ranch. The invitation surprised her. You want me to visit Circle B, if you're willing. The house needs a woman's touch, and I'd value your opinion. She should refuse. The propriety of visiting a bachelor's home, even in daylight, was questionable. But the thought of a day away from town, away from watchful eyes and whispers, was appealing. I'll consider it, she said finally. That's all I ask. He tipped his new hat. Good night, Miss Ross. Kathleen, she corrected. If we're to be friends, his smile widened. Good night, Kathleen. She watched him walk away, a tall figure in the moonlight. Only after he had disappeared around the corner did she enter her house, her mind troubled by emotions she had thought long buried. True to his word, Nathan appeared at her door Sunday afternoon. Kathleen had spent the morning at church, enduring the stares and whispers that had become her constant companions. The sermon, ironically, had been on judgment and forgiveness. The preacher's eyes had found her several times during his discourse on how only God could judge the heart. Nathan was waiting with a buggy, not on horseback as she had expected. I thought this would be more comfortable, he explained, helping her up to the seat. The Circle B ranch was 4 miles outside of town, set in a shallow valley with good grazing land and access to a year-round creek, valuable assets in the arid Arizona landscape. The main house was modest but solid, a single-story structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings nearby. A bunkhouse stood empty. Nathan explained that he currently managed the small herd alone but planned to hire hands as he expanded. It's not much compared to the spreads up north, he said as he showed her around, but it has potential. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished but clean. It was clear a bachelor lived there. Practical necessities were in place, but there were no curtains, no cushions, nothing to soften the utilitarian space. My uncle wasn't one for comforts, Nathan explained, leading her through the main room to a small kitchen. I haven't had time to make many changes. It's a good, solid house, Kathleen said, noting the quality of the woodwork. With some small additions, it could be quite comfortable. They shared a simple lunch on the porch, watching red-tailed hawks circle above the pasture. The silence between them was easy, not awkward as Kathleen had feared it might be. "How did you come to ranching?" she asked eventually. Nathan stretched his long legs before him. "My father was a rancher in Texas. I grew up on horseback, learning the business from him. When the war came, I enlisted." His expression grew distant. "After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Texas. Too many memories. So I drifted north, worked cattle drives, eventually saved enough to buy my own small spread in Montana." "You fought for the Confederacy?" "Yes." His eyes met hers, assessing her reaction. "Not for slavery. My family never owned slaves and couldn't have afforded them if they'd wanted to. I fought because Texas was home." Kathleen nodded. The war had ended 16 years ago, but its divisions still ran deep across the country. "My brother fought for the Union. He died at Antietam." "I'm sorry." Nathan's voice was soft. "War makes victims of us all on both sides." As the afternoon waned, Nathan showed her his small herd of cattle, pointing out the improvements he planned for the ranch. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Kathleen found herself drawn into his vision for the place. "You know," she said as they walked back toward the house, "some simple curtains would make a world of difference inside. I have fabric at the shop that would suit the windows well." "Are you offering to make curtains, Kathleen?" he asked with a smile. "I might be. Consider it a housewarming gift." "I'd be honored. Though I warn you, once the ladies in town see curtains in my windows, they'll know a woman had a hand in it. That might start talk." She laughed, surprising herself with the sound. "Nathan, there's already talk. A few curtains won't make it worse." As he drove her back to town in the fading light, Kathleen realized she had spent more hours in Nathan's company than she had with any person since Benjamin's death. More surprisingly, she had enjoyed every moment. At her door, Nathan helped her down from the buggy. "Thank you for coming today. Thank you for inviting me. It was refreshing to be away from town for a while." He studied her face in the twilight. "Would it be too forward to ask if I might call on you again?" Kathleen hesitated. The day had been pleasant, more than pleasant, but she couldn't ignore the reality of her situation. "Nathan, I meant what I said about not remarrying. And while I've enjoyed your company immensely, I have to consider what continuing our friendship might mean. What it might mean to the town or to you. Both." She met his gaze directly. "The town already believes I'm cursed or worse, and she paused. "I've buried 3 husbands. I don't have the heart to risk caring for anyone else." Nathan nodded slowly. "I understand. But Kathleen, friendship doesn't have to lead anywhere you don't want it to go. And as for the town," he shrugged, "I've never much cared what others think of me. You should care. You're establishing yourself here, building a business. Association with me could make that difficult. Let me worry about that." He touched her hand briefly. "I'll respect your wishes either way, but I hope you'll allow our friendship to continue." After a moment, Kathleen nodded. "Very well. But I think we should be careful about appearances. Perhaps we could meet at the ranch occasionally, rather than in town." "As you wish," he smiled. "Though I still intend to patronize your shop regularly, I suddenly find myself in need of several hats." Despite her reservations, Kathleen found herself looking forward to Nathan's visits to her shop over the next few weeks. He came regularly, sometimes to order small items, handkerchiefs, gloves, and sometimes just to talk. Their conversations ranged widely, from books they had read to their childhoods, to their dreams for the future. Nathan spoke of expanding the Circle B, while Kathleen confessed her desire to someday return east, perhaps to open a shop in St. Louis or Chicago. "Why haven't you?" he asked one quiet afternoon as she measured fabric for the curtains she had promised. "Left Oatman, you mean?" She considered the question. "Stubbornness, partly. I don't want to be driven away, and—" she hesitated. "This is where they're buried, all three of them. It feels like abandonment to leave." Nathan watched her work, his expression thoughtful. "Were you happy with your husbands?" The question surprised her. No one had ever asked about her marriages beyond the morbid details of their endings. "I was content," she said after a moment. "Thomas was kind. We were young and in love, or what we thought was love. Edward was more practical. We married because we both needed the arrangement. He needed a wife to maintain his home, and I needed the security of marriage in a frontier town. And Benjamin was." She smiled sadly. "He was gentle, a good man. We were companions more than passionate lovers. He knew about the whispers that had started after Edward died, but he didn't care. Said people would always talk, and all that mattered was that we knew the truth." Nathan nodded. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was." She cut a length of fabric decisively. "And now they're all gone, and I'm the town pariah. Life has a strange sense of humor." As spring turned to summer, Kathleen found herself looking forward to Sundays with increasing anticipation. Nathan would collect her after church, and they would spend the afternoon at Circle B, away from the town's watchful eyes. She helped him make the house more comfortable, adding not just curtains but cushions for the hard wooden chairs and a colorful quilt for the spare bedroom. The ranch itself was flourishing under Nathan's careful management. He had hired two Hands brothers from Texas, who seemed untroubled by their employer's friendship with the cursed widow, and increased his herd. The vegetable garden Kathleen had encouraged him to plant was thriving in the summer heat, providing fresh produce for his table. For her part, Kathleen found that the town's attitude toward her was slowly shifting, not toward acceptance but to a sort of resigned tolerance. Nathan's obvious respect for her, combined with his growing status as a successful rancher, provided a buffer against the worst of the gossip. Still, there were those who watched their friendship with disapproving eyes. One Sunday in late July, as Nathan was helping Kathleen into the buggy after church, Mayor Jenkins approached them, his wife at his side. "Irwin," he said with a curt nod. "Miss Ross." "Mayor," Nathan replied pleasantly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Indeed." The mayor's eyes moved between them. "Quite a few beautiful days you two have been enjoying together. The town's starting to talk." "The town talks about many things," Kathleen said coolly. "Most of them not worth listening to." Mrs. Jenkins sniffed. "A woman in your position should be more mindful of appearances. 3 husbands in the ground and already setting your cap for a 4th. Nathan's expression hardened. "Mrs. Jenkins, you're speaking to a lady. I suggest you remember that." "Lady," Mrs. Jenkins laughed. "Is that what you call that's enough?" Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. "Miss Ross is accompanying me to review improvements to my home that she has kindly helped me make. There is nothing improper in our friendship, and if the town has nothing better to discuss, perhaps it needs more productive pursuits." The mayor's face reddened. "Now see here, Irwin. We're just concerned for your welfare. Given Miss Ross's history—" "My history," Kathleen interrupted, her patience finally breaking, "is one of tragedy, not wrongdoing. I lost 3 good men to accidents and illness, not to any action of mine. I have been investigated and cleared of any suspicion by your own sheriff, and yet you continue to treat me as though I'm guilty of some unnamed crime." She straightened her shoulders. I have endured your whispers and your stares for years because this is my home. But I will not stand here and be insulted to my face. Good day, Mayor Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins. With that, she climbed into the buggy without waiting for Nathan's assistance. After a moment, he joined her, taking the reins without a word. They drove in silence until they were well out of town. I apologize for losing my temper, Kathleen said finally. Nathan glanced at her, a smile tugging at his mouth. Don't, it was magnificent to watch. Despite herself, she laughed. It wasn't very ladylike. It was honest, and long overdue from what I've seen. He guided the horses around a bend in the road. Kathleen, may I ask you something? Of course. You truly intend to remain in Oatman forever, to endure those people and their cruelty? She looked out at the passing landscape, the rocky hills and scattered mesquite. I don't know any more. For so long, staying was a matter of pride, of not letting them win. She sighed. But sometimes I wonder if there's anything worth winning here. There are other places, other towns, where I'd always be the woman with 3 dead husbands, she said quietly. The story would follow me. Not everywhere. He slowed the horses as they approached the ranch. Some places are too busy looking forward to worry about the past. At the house, Nathan surprised her by producing a picnic basket. I thought we might eat by the creek today. It's cooler there. They settled in the shade of a cottonwood tree beside the small stream that wound through the property. Nathan spread a blanket, and Kathleen arranged the food: cold chicken, fresh bread, early apples from the tree behind the house. As they ate, Kathleen found herself studying Nathan's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled. In the months of their friendship, she had come to know him well, his quiet sense of humor, his patience, his unwavering integrity. She had also grown increasingly aware of him as a man: the breadth of his shoulders, the gentleness of his hands, the warmth in his blue eyes when they rested on her. You're staring, he said, not looking at her. Kathleen felt heat rise in her cheeks. I was just thinking about how different you are from any man I've known. The words came unbidden, more honest than she had intended. Now he did look at her, his expression serious. Different how? She considered her answer carefully. You're steadier, more certain of yourself. The men I married were all searching for something: fortune, position, a place to belong. You seem to already know who you are and what you want. Not always, he said softly, but I try to be honest with myself and with others. Silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged with something Kathleen wasn't ready to name. Kathleen, Nathan said finally, I need to be honest with you now. Our friendship means a great deal to me, more than I expected when I first asked you to dinner. He met her eyes directly. My feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. She looked away, her heart racing. Nathan, please let me finish. He took a deep breath. I understand your reservations about remarriage. I respect them, but I want you to know that what I feel for you is real and enduring. And if friendship is all you can offer, I will accept that gladly rather than lose you from my life. Kathleen's hands trembled as she folded her napkin. I care for you too, she admitted quietly, more than I thought possible. But I'm afraid, Nathan. Not just of loving and losing again, but of what it might mean for you. The town already whispers about us. If we were to court openly, let them whisper. He reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers. I've never put much stock in superstition, Kathleen. I don't believe in curses. I believe in building a life with someone who shares your values, your dreams. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. Someone who makes you laugh even when the world seems determined to make you cry. Tears blurred her vision. You deserve better than a woman the whole town believes is either a witch or a murderer. There is no better than you. His voice was firm. You're the strongest, most graceful person I've ever known, and if the town can't see that, it's their loss." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for an answer today, just that you'll think about what might be possible between us." Kathleen nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. They finished their meal in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, one filled with unspoken possibilities. As the summer progressed, Kathleen found herself thinking constantly of Nathan's words by the creek. Their outward relationship remained unchanged: Sunday visits to the ranch, occasional dinners at the hotel's private parlor, his regular stops at her shop. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Their glances held longer. Their hands found reasons to touch. The space between them seemed charged with awareness. In town, the gossip continued but took on a new tone. Some still muttered about curses and bad luck, but others, particularly the younger women, seemed to find Nathan's attention to Kathleen romantic rather than foolhardy. Like something from a novel, Kathleen overheard one girl say to another outside the general store, defying the whole town for love. Love. The word both thrilled and terrified her. Was that what she felt for Nathan? This constant awareness, this longing for his company, this feeling of rightness when they were together. It had been so long since she had experienced anything beyond comfortable affection that she wasn't sure she recognized the emotion. One evening in early September, as Nathan walked her home from the hotel after dinner, he asked, "Have you thought about what we discussed by the creek?" Kathleen took a deep breath. "I've thought of little else." They stopped beneath a cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze. Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. And his voice was soft. "I'm still afraid," she admitted. "Not just of losing someone else I care for, but of what it might mean for you. The town's memory is long, Nathan. They may never fully accept me or any man who chooses to be with me. I don't need the town's acceptance, only yours." He took her hands in his. "Kathleen, I love you. I believe I started falling in love with you that first day in your shop, when you stood so straight and proud despite everything the town was saying. I love your courage, your honesty, your quiet strength." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I'm not asking for marriage, not yet. But I am asking if you might consider a future with me, whatever form that takes." Kathleen looked into his eyes, so blue and earnest in the moonlight. In them, she saw not just desire but understanding, patience, respect. Everything she had ever wanted and had never fully found in her previous marriages. "I care for you deeply," she said finally. "More than I thought possible after everything that's happened. But Nathan, if we do this, if we court openly, you need to be prepared for the consequences. Not everyone will be as romantic as those young girls in the mercantile. Some will be cruel. Let them try," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "I've faced worse than town gossips." "So have I," she smiled faintly. "And I suppose we've both survived. Is that a yes, Kathleen Ross? Will you allow me to court you properly?" Her heart beat fast against her ribs. After so much loss, after so much pain, was she truly considering opening herself to the possibility of love again? To the risk of heartbreak? To the certainty of more whispers and stares? Looking at Nathan's face, so full of hope and certainty, she found her answer. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and over far too quickly. But it sealed a promise between them, a beginning. As they continued toward her house, hand in hand now, Kathleen felt lighter than she had in years. There would be challenges ahead: the town's reaction, her own lingering fears, the practical matters of building a life together. But for the first time since Benjamin's death, she felt hope unfurling within her like a desert flower after rain. The town's reaction to their courtship was predictably mixed. Some, like Abigail Miller and her preacher husband, offered cautious congratulations. Others watched with barely concealed disapproval. Mayor Jenkins made a point of crossing the street whenever he saw them together. Mrs. Hollister spread dire predictions about Nathan's future health. But to Kathleen's surprise, many of the townspeople seemed to be softening toward her. Perhaps it was Nathan's obvious happiness, or the way Kathleen herself had begun to carry herself more confidently. Whatever the reason, the open hostility she had faced for so long began to give way to a cautious neutrality. Nathan courted her with a quiet determination that melted the last of her reservations. He brought her wildflowers picked from the range, books ordered specially from Denver, small treasures that showed how well he was coming to know her tastes. More importantly, he listened to her hopes, her fears, her memories both painful and precious. In him, she found not just a potential husband but a true partner, someone who valued her mind as much as her heart. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Nathan invited Kathleen to a harvest dance being held at a neighboring ranch. It would be their first social event as a couple outside of Oatman. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as they rode toward the Nelson Ranch. "Everyone from 3 counties will be there." "That's precisely why I'm sure," Nathan replied, guiding the buggy down the rutted road. "It's time people saw us together in public, enjoying ourselves like any other couple. Besides, the Nelsons specifically asked me to bring you. Martha Nelson says she's been wanting a new hat for ages but was too intimidated to come to your shop." Kathleen laughed. "Intimidated? Of me?" "You do have a rather formidable reputation," he teased. "The independent businesswoman who stands up to the entire town. A reputation you seem to have encouraged. I merely speak the truth as I see it." He glanced at her, his eyes warm. "You look beautiful tonight." She had worn her best dress for the occasion, a deep green wool that complemented her eyes. Her hair was arranged more elaborately than usual, with a small hat pinned at a jaunty angle. "Thank you," she said, feeling a flutter of pleasure at his admiration. The Nelson Ranch was ablaze with lanterns, the barn cleared for dancing, tables laden with food set up outside. Fiddle music spilled into the night air, along with laughter and the murmur of conversation. As Nathan helped Kathleen down from the buggy, she felt a moment of trepidation. Many of these people would know her story or some version of it. "Ready?" Nathan asked, offering his arm. She straightened her shoulders. "Ready." To Kathleen's relief, Martha Nelson greeted them warmly, exclaiming over Kathleen's hat and immediately engaging her in conversation about commissioning one for herself. John Nelson clapped Nathan on the shoulder and led him to where the men were sampling a potent cider. Before long, Kathleen found herself surrounded by curious but friendly ranch wives, answering questions about the latest fashions from the East. When the dancing began, Nathan appeared at her side. "May I have this dance, Miss Ross?" "You may, Mr. Irwin." She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the center of the barn. The fiddles struck up a lively tune, and Nathan proved himself to be a skilled dancer, guiding her through the steps with easy confidence. Kathleen, who had always enjoyed dancing but had few opportunities in recent years, found herself laughing as they twirled among the other couples. "You never told me you could dance," she said during a pause in the music. "One of my many hidden talents," he replied with a wink. "I spent a winter working at a dance hall in Denver. Not as a dancer," he added quickly, seeing her raised eyebrow, "as security, but I watched and learned." As the evening progressed, Kathleen danced not only with Nathan but with several of the neighboring ranchers, who seemed to have none of Oatman's reservations about her. By the time they left, well past midnight, she felt more accepted and at ease than she had in years. "Thank you," she said as they drove home beneath a canopy of stars. "Tonight was wonderful," Nathan smiled. "The first of many, I hope." The air had grown cooler and Kathleen shivered slightly. Without a word, Nathan stopped the buggy long enough to wrap a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering to tuck it securely around her. When he was finished, he didn't immediately move away but instead leaned closer, his eyes asking a silent question. Kathleen answered by lifting her face to his. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more assured, a promise rather than a question. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket. When they finally broke apart, Nathan's eyes were darker, his breath uneven. "Kathleen," he said softly, "I want to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes, not yet," he said with a small smile. "Soon, but not tonight. Tonight is perfect just as it is." As they continued toward town, Kathleen rested her head against his shoulder, content in the moment and increasingly hopeful about what the future might hold. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Kathleen's life. Her shop flourished as women from surrounding ranches, having met her at the Nelson dance, came to order hats and accessories. Nathan's ranch prospered as well, his careful management and hard work yielding results that earned the respect of even his most skeptical neighbors. Their courtship progressed with a sweet inevitability. They rode together across the range, picnicked by the creek, read to each other in the evenings. Gradually, the town's attitude shifted from suspicious tolerance to grudging acceptance. Even Mayor Jenkins nodded curtly when they passed on the street. One Sunday in late October, Nathan invited Kathleen to the ranch as usual but seemed unusually nervous, his normal, easy confidence replaced by a restless energy. After dinner, he suggested a walk to the creek. The afternoon was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, the trees along the creek flaming with autumn color. They walked hand in hand, talking of small things, until they reached the cottonwood where they had shared their picnic months before. "You remember what we talked about here?" Nathan asked, stopping beneath the tree. "I do," Kathleen smiled. "You told me how you felt about me, and I admitted I was afraid but willing to try. And now," he took both her hands in his, "are you still afraid?" She considered the question honestly. "Not of loving you," she said finally. "But sometimes I still worry about what it might mean. 3 husbands, Nathan, all dead before their time. I know it's not rational, but sometimes I wonder if there isn't some truth to what the town believes, that I bring bad luck to the men who love me. I don't believe in luck, good or bad." His voice was steady. "I believe in living each day fully, in loving completely, in making choices and accepting their consequences." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket. "Which brings me to the question I've been waiting to ask." Kathleen's breath caught as he withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Kathleen Ross, I love you. I have loved you since that first day in your shop, when you stood so straight and proud despite everything. I love your strength, your honesty, your courage. I love the way you see beauty in small things, the way you never surrender to fear or despair." He took a deep breath. "I want to build a life with you here or elsewhere if you prefer. I want to wake beside you each morning and sleep beside you each night. I want to face whatever comes, good or bad, with you at my side." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Kathleen's vision. In her heart, she had known this moment was coming, had even longed for it. But now that it was here, all her fears rushed back, not just for Nathan but for herself. Could she bear it if she lost him too? "Nathan," she whispered, "I love you more than I ever thought possible. But I'm terrified of losing you, of being alone again. We're all at risk of losing those we love, Kathleen. That's the price of opening our hearts." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I'd rather have whatever time we're granted together than live a lifetime of safety without you." She looked into his eyes and saw not blind infatuation but clear-eyed love, tempered with understanding and respect. This was a man who knew her strengths and weaknesses, her joys and sorrows, her past and her fears for the future. And he loved her still. "Yes," she said finally, her voice stronger. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was kissing her, his arms around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground in his joy. Kathleen laughed against his mouth, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "When?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "Soon, I hope." "Soon," she agreed. "But Nathan, I don't want a big wedding, nothing elaborate or public, just us, a preacher, and perhaps a few friends." "Whatever you want." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Though I admit, I'd like to stand up before the whole town and declare that Kathleen Ross, soon to be Kathleen Irwin, has chosen me above all others," she smiled. "Your pride is showing, Mr. Irwin." "It's not pride," he corrected. "It's wonder. That someone as extraordinary as you could love someone as ordinary as me. There is nothing ordinary about you, Nathan." She touched his cheek. "And I do love you, more than I can say." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Circle B Ranch. Reverend Miller officiated, with Abigail Miller and John Nelson serving as witnesses. Kathleen wore a dove-gray dress she had made herself, and a small hat adorned with a single white feather. Nathan wore his best suit and the first hat she had made for him. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Their small gathering celebrated with a meal prepared by Martha Nelson and her daughters, with champagne Nathan had ordered specially from San Francisco. That night, alone in the ranch house that was now their home, Kathleen stood by the window looking out at the moonlit landscape. Nathan came up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy, Mrs. Irwin," he murmured against her ear. "Very." She leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his body. "Though I keep expecting someone to burst in with dire warnings about your impending doom," he chuckled. "Let them try. I've never felt more alive than I do right now with you in my arms." She turned in his embrace to face him. "I love you, Nathan. I promise to make each day we have together count." "As do I." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But I intend that to be a great many days, Kathleen. Decades, in fact. Enough to see our children grown and our grandchildren born." "Children," she whispered, a hope she had long abandoned kindling anew. "If you want them." His eyes were gentle. "A houseful, or just 1 or 2, or none at all if that's your preference. As long as I have you, I have everything I need." Kathleen kissed him, pouring all her love and hope and newfound courage into the embrace. Whatever the future held, joy or sorrow, abundance or hardship, they would face it together. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of love strong enough to overcome it. Winter came early that year, with a December snowfall that blanketed the desert in white. Kathleen watched it from the warmth of their bedroom, Nathan's arm draped around her shoulders as they stood by the window. "It's beautiful," she murmured, "like a different world. MMM." He kissed the top of her head. "Speaking of different worlds, I had a letter from my friend in Colorado yesterday, the one I told you about who's developing that new silver mine. The one who offered you a position as manager." Kathleen turned to look at him. "What did he say?" "The offer still stands." Good pay, a proper house in a growing town. He says Denver is booming, plenty of ladies who'd pay well for fine millinery. Kathleen's pulse quickened. Are you considering it? I'm considering what might be best for us. Nathan's eyes were serious. I know you've made peace with Oatman, more or less, and the ranch is doing well. But sometimes I wonder if a fresh start might be good for both of us. A place where I wouldn't be the widow with 3 dead husbands. A place where you'd be Kathleen Irwin, talented milliner and my beloved wife. Nothing more, nothing less. She thought about it for a long moment. Oatman had been her home for 5 years. She had put down roots here, survived its judgment, found a measure of acceptance. And yet, the thought of a new beginning, far from the whispers and stares that had defined her for so long, was undeniably appealing. What about the ranch? She asked. You've worked so hard to build it up. John Nelson has expressed interest in buying it if we ever decided to sell. His oldest son is getting married in the spring and they could use the additional grazing land. Nathan shrugged. It's just an option, Kathleen. We don't have to decide anything now. She looked out at the snow again, pristine and full of possibility. I think I'd like to consider it. Not because I'm running away from Oatman, but because I'm running towards something better. With you. His smile warmed her more than the fire crackling in the hearth. That's all I wanted to hear. Spring came late but gloriously, the desert erupting in a riot of wildflowers after the wet winter. By then, the decision had been made. Nathan had accepted his friend's offer in Denver, and the ranch was sold to the Nelsons for a fair price. They would leave Oatman in June, after the last of the spring roundup. The town's reaction to their departure was mixed. Some, like Mayor Jenkins, seemed relieved. Others expressed genuine regret. Abigail Miller wept openly when Kathleen told her the news. "Who will make my hats?" she asked, only half joking through her tears. "I'll send you one from Denver every season," Kathleen promised, hugging her friend. "And you must visit us when you can." On their last Sunday in Oatman, Kathleen and Nathan attended church as usual. After the service, Reverend Miller surprised them by asking the congregation to stay for a special announcement. As many of you know, we will soon be saying farewell to Nathan and Kathleen Irwin as they begin a new chapter in Denver, he said from the pulpit. While we are saddened to lose them from our community, we wish them every blessing in their new endeavor. He paused, his gaze sweeping the church. I am reminded of the scripture that tells us not to judge, lest we be judged. Our town has not always shown Christian charity to Kathleen during her times of trial. Yet she has faced adversity with grace and dignity, never returning harshness for harshness. A murmur ran through the congregation. Kathleen felt Nathan's hand tighten around hers. As they prepare to leave us, the Reverend continued, I ask that we come together as a community to offer them our prayers and good wishes. Let us show that Oatman can not only prosper materially, as we have with the mines, but spiritually as well, through forgiveness and understanding. To Kathleen's astonishment, Mayor Jenkins was the first to stand. Reverend Miller speaks truth, he said gruffly. Mrs. Irwin, Kathleen, I owe you an apology. This town owes you an apology. We let fear and superstition cloud our judgment. Others followed, offering apologies, well wishes, even tearful embraces. Mrs. Hollister pressed a piece of lace into Kathleen's hands for your new shop in Denver. John Nelson promised to care for the graves of her former husbands. They'll not be forgotten or neglected, he assured her. By the time they left the church, Kathleen was overwhelmed. I never expected this, she whispered to Nathan as they walked home. People can surprise you, he replied, his arm around her waist, for better or worse. Today it was for better. She looked up at him, her heart full. Thank you for believing in me when no one else would, for seeing beyond the whispers and the fear. I only saw what was there all along." He kissed her forehead. A remarkable woman worth loving, curse or no curse. They left Oatman on a bright June morning, their wagon loaded with their possessions, their hearts full of hope for the future. As the town receded behind them, Kathleen looked back once, offering a silent farewell to the place that had shaped her so profoundly, both through its cruelty and its eventual redemption. "Ready?" Nathan asked, his hand covering hers on the wagon seat. She turned to him, to the road ahead, to the promise of a new beginning. Ready. Denver welcomed them with opportunities neither had imagined in Oatman. Nathan's experience with both ranching and mining made him valuable to the growing silver industry. Kathleen's millinery skills found eager customers among Denver's society women, who appreciated both her craftsmanship and her Eastern sensibilities. Within a year, they had established themselves comfortably, Nathan as a respected mine manager, Kathleen as the proprietress of a successful shop in a fashionable district. Their home, a tidy two-story house in a neighborhood of similar young professionals, became a warm haven where friends gathered regularly. Best of all, no one in Denver knew or cared about Kathleen's past. Here, she was simply Mrs. Irwin, the talented milliner married to the capable Mr. Irwin from the Silver Crown mine. The weight of suspicion and whispers that had followed her for so long in Oatman was lifted, allowing her to rediscover parts of herself that had been suppressed by grief and isolation. In their second year in Denver, their joy was multiplied by the birth of their son, William Thomas Irwin, named for both Nathan's father and Kathleen's first husband. The baby was robust and healthy, with Nathan's blue eyes and Kathleen's determined chin. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, holding his son for the first time, his voice thick with emotion. "He is," Kathleen agreed, exhausted but radiant. "And he's ours." As William grew from infant to toddler, their family expanded again with the birth of a daughter, Elizabeth Abigail. Their home echoed with children's laughter, a sound Kathleen had once feared she might never hear. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching William chase fireflies in the summer twilight while Elizabeth slept in Nathan's arms, Kathleen felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "What is it, love?" Nathan asked, noticing her expression. "I was just thinking about Oatman," she said softly. "About how different our lives might have been if you hadn't walked into my shop that day, if you had listened to the whispers instead of making up your own mind." He shifted Elizabeth gently to one arm so he could take Kathleen's hand with the other. "I've never been much for following the crowd. Thank God for that." She squeezed his fingers. "Do you ever regret it, leaving the ranch, taking a chance on the cursed widow?" Nathan's laugh was low and warm. "Not for a single moment, though I must say if you were cursed, it was with the best kind of curse." "Oh, and what kind is that? The kind that brings a stubborn, beautiful, brave woman into a man's life and changes everything for the better." He leaned over to kiss her, careful not to disturb their sleeping daughter. "I love you, Kathleen Irwin, curse and all. And I love you, Nathan Irwin. Thank you for daring to court me when no one else would." As the fireflies danced in the gathering dusk, and their children living proof against any talk of curses filled their lives with joy, Kathleen knew that some risks were worth taking, some fears worth facing. Love, she had learned, was not a guarantee against loss, but it was the only defense against loneliness, the only true comfort in a world where nothing was certain but change itself. In the years that followed, the legend of the cursed widow of Oatman faded into distant memory, replaced by the reality of Kathleen and Nathan Irwin, respected citizens of Denver, devoted parents and partners whose love had been forged in the crucible of adversity and emerged stronger for the testing. And if, occasionally, someone passing through from Arizona mentioned a story they'd heard about a woman with 3 dead husbands and the courageous cowboy who had dared to court her, Kathleen would simply smile and say, "How fascinating. Sounds like something from a novel." For she had learned that real life, was not about the stories others told about you, but the story you chose to write for yourself. One day, one choice, one act of courage at a time.